came to know him better as a person, you know. Um, he, we used to have reunion meetings of the 12th Army Group in Washington, D.C., and I would see him down there at those meetings. And then he came out to Honolulu one time, and and I saw him there on two different occasions. Um, he, um, he went on, you know, to be the the head of all of our military services after the war was over, and uh, uh, greatly esteemed by President Truman during his period. He was.
Does that have to do with this time when you did something with NBC and the top secret Allied command?
Oh,
Paul said you
at
had.
the end of the war, we were. General Bradley's command was in Wiesbaden, a spa town on the Rhine River. Uh, we had a Jewish doctor who was a friend of mine who said the main thing about Wiesbaden was it was a place where they cured skin diseases. And he said there's no happier person in the medical profession than a skin doctor, because his patients never die and they never get well. And Wiesbaden had these baths and these special waters you should drink, and there we were. But General Bradley's forward headquarters was up in a place beyond bad, not Badge Fallbach. Well, it was in a forward area, and on the day that the war ended, of course, we had a service in Wiesbaden that was attended by hundreds of people in their great casino. And then I got a telephone call that I should go up to General Bradley's headquarters and conduct a service there. So I drove up through these beautiful German cities that had hardly been touched by the war, and got there to find that I was not just to have sort of a prayer marking the end of the war, but that I should have a whole service. So I had to sit down and work feverishly to get this in order, because we had present with us a well-known personality, a TV personality, sort of like Tom Brokaw today, named David Anderson. And he told me that the service would be not televised, but made possible for radio, and that all the way across America, their different stations would be switching on here, switching on there, and sometimes switching on to our station. So I got busy and got things organized, and then General Bradley came to the service with his whole staff. And this I felt was quite impressive. And we held the service, and I made a little address about how I felt about the end of the war, and then afterwards, General Bradley wrote a book book about his experiences in the war, and he was kind enough to give me a special edition of the book with the text that I used in this address, written in his own handwriting and his own name, his own signature underneath it. That pleased me very much. I count it as a great treasure. I have it right on the shelf over there. Would you like to see it?
You know what I'd like to know is,
Yeah.
I'd like to know what you said.
Oh,
Do you want us to get it?
I can tell you exactly, because I had to write it all out in advance because the Army wouldn't permit anything to be said, you see, at this service unless it met with their approval. So, of course, I had to it should be right in here somewhere. Let's see, it was after Franklin Roosevelt's death. Yes. Well, what I said was, thank God.
Ooh, wait, hold on. This is the one that is. Okay, go ahead.
We thank God the conflict ends with victory for the United Nations. With what joy we can proclaim this victory day. Certainly we have every right to hope that the liberties for all people will grow from the multitude of sacrifices that have been made. May this new era be a period of realization of the prophet's dream, when every man would proclaim liberty to his neighbor. Reflective minds must watch with concern the course chosen by the delegates to the United Nations Conference in San Francisco. Here is the first step toward building victory into durable peace. While we find the world of tomorrow an international outlook with the breadth of vision and freedom that has characterized our country's growth, if not, we may find a world bearing more resemblance to Alcatraz, the prison rock in San Francisco Harbor. Yet the thoughtful mind remembers that this is a choice which we are always faced with if we are free to choose. The victory has brought us freedom of choice and given the people of the earth real hope. Truly, this is a cause for celebration. The days of war are hard times and breed many griefs. They are too times of testing and development of character. The rewards that remain, however, is the peace. Surely today we may exchange for the spirit of heaviness, the garment of joyful praise. Well, that was all there was of it, but I still feel it was the right thing to have said at that time. Right after the service, a group of us went out to the airport, and there we saw some German planes come flying into the airport to surrender. They were all women pilots, and they were just as angry as they could be. They said they wished that they were still fighting us. They weren't surrendering, you know. They were giving up. They knew they were overpowered, but they were most unfriendly, and that was kind of interesting because most excuse me, most of the Germans after their defeat were just as submissive as could be, eager to get on the right side of the Americans.
Were you part of a top secret Allied command?
No,
That was
no,
what General
no,
Bradley
no,
was part of.
no, no, no. I did. I do remember this. After the service, marking the German surrender, I did see Lieutenant Colonel Perrine, who was the secretary of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I did not find him jubilant. He sighed, he said the war was over, but he said he wasn't sure that we could call it a victory. By that he meant that the German forces had fought with extraordinary strength and bravery. He said, we crushed them. We crushed them with the might of our military power, with all of our armor, and with our own perseverance, of course. I thought that was interesting. And I've done some reading since then, and the German forces did fight with extraordinary skill and mettle, it should be said.
How did you feel when the war was over, or how did you feel about the war?
Oh,
I mean, you now you've spent how many years had you been in Europe?
only not really quite a year. We'd done all this in less than a year. D-Day was the 6th of June. The end of the war was the 8th of May, the following May. So it was just about 11 months.
What were those months like for you?
Well, they were certainly busy months.
I mean, could you say that you remember that they were, you remember every day? Was it like every day was something?
Oh, I think we must have pressed the.
You've never been to war.
Yes.
You were I don't know how old you were. You had come from America. You thought, we're going to go get the Germans. You've been there for 11 months. What was it like for you?
Well, there was always, of course, immense curiosity about the enemy. I remember one time a captured German general appeared in a command car being driven by our soldiers, of course. And he was seated in this big apparatus, and his eyes were blindfolded. We could only look at him. But we looked at him with great curiosity because in modern warfare, it's only when there's fighting in towns that it's likely that enemy soldiers are apt to encounter each other. Most of the time, the fighting is against an enemy you don't see at all. They're, the snipers are in places where they might see a form and shoot, but they don't know who the person is they've shot or anything like that.
So you're saying for you it was very intense because you got to see the Germans up close, or?
No, we did not see the Germans up close.
I mean, what was it like for you? What did the men come and talk to you?
Yes,
What
yes.
was that part like for you? Not so much the history of it, but what was it like being a chaplain at war?
Well, one of the main things is you have to be a good listener. You have to be a good listener and ready to enter into the problem of the person who's talking with you with as much insight and understanding as you might possess. With so many troops overseas, there are all kinds of things happening for them. There are local problems they get into. There are problems back at home that trouble them a great deal. There are their relatives back home who die, just of natural causes, and they're bereaved, and they come to see the chaplain, and that's a matter of everyday concern. Now, Father Hines and I worked things out so that we would try to appear at regular hours, in the three main components of General Bradley's command: forward, main, and rear. And one of us would do this 1 week, attending to the soldiers who came to see us and wanted help. And then the next week, we would go off and service his troops that were spread out all along the line. And this, because communication is at the very heart of military movement or combat. And General Bradley had to be kept aware at all times about what was happening along the line. And so that...
Do you recall any, did you learn anything about when you were talking to these soldiers about war, or did it change your thoughts? I mean, did something happen to you as a result of being a chaplain there? Because it must have been very different.
Yes. No, I wouldn't say so. Of course, there were some transforming experiences.
For you?
Well, I must say, just at the moment, that this seems like I can't think of any one thing. I'm afraid I can't fulfill your want there.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess this is when you collected all the glass just during that 11 months?
Yes.
Can you just say that as a...
Well, I gathered the glass because, you see, I thought that I would like to have in a church that I would probably look after later, a big glass window with all these different fragments from some of these 20 different places melded into the one window with some kind of a scene suggesting the peace that God wants us to have, either with a figure of Christ in the center or some picture of, well, to use an old phrase, Beulah land, just a peaceful scene. So that's why I began picking up these shards in all these different places. And they each had a certain association with the war, which I've tried to mention in one way or another in my book. And I would pick them up and then mail them home to my mother, and she kept them. So when I got back after the war, I found them all in a little wooden box with in different envelopes in which I had mailed them back to the States. So that's the way we knew where each one of these shards came from. And I kept them for years and never had the opportunity really to do anything about them until quite recently when Mr. Chafee became interested in them.
Are you a collector, or was that the
Yes,
first time you collected?
I'm a trash collector. I collect all kinds of things. I have a whole variety of interests.
So when you were collecting, okay, thanks. When you were collecting the glass, you thought to yourself, I'd like to make this into a glass. Even back then when you were how old? 30 years old or something?
Yeah, 32, let's say, in Germany. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, I thought I'd like to have one big glass window. That was my thought. I've always been interested in stained glass. I love the glass in medieval churches. It's so rich and vibrant. At one time when I had this little church in Western Washington, I even sent away for some glass from Blenko, a very well-known company in Virginia. I had a friend who was also a clergyman, and he used to make his own stained glass windows. He did them very well.
Paul was saying there's something about NBC and why you went to the battlefield. I don't know what he was talking about. Do you?
No, I don't know what he's talking about.
NBC? Were you on NBC?
Unless they tuned in on this memorial and this service at the end of the war. No, not at any other time that I can remember of.
Would you say that you think war is necessary, but it's bad, or what's your opinion about war?
I wish I could answer that question. In this day, I must say, I feel rather despondent, because looking over the history of humankind, it just seems to be that violence is programmed in the very nature of being a human being. There's a necessity for confrontation, for arrogance, for benefit of self, so that there have been no societies that we know of that have been free of war. One human aggregation after another has been dissatisfied with the limits of their borders, and they've gone to take more away from their neighbors, and there's been resistance and there has been war. But somewhere it's getting so much worse. Nuclear bombs, the evils that come with extremists who will do anything to disrupt the affairs of others. It's a further expression of the same thing, and somehow or other it must be stopped, it must be cleansed. And this interfaith work of extending study and compassion and understanding into fields that are strange to us is so necessary. We must not allow the present divisions among mankind to be a matter of different civilizations warring with one another. There's got to be outreach and understanding that that grips people. Such, I think, is the work of the Interfaith Center at the Presidio. I hope it all comes to a good fruition. Are we waiting for a tape to run out, or?
We only have one tape today.
Yes, yes.
You don't want, I mean, we did good today.